The polished mahogany doors of the mediator's office swung open and every head turned. It wasn't just Celeste Langford entering. It was a reckoning. 5 months pregnant, glowing in a sapphire dress that defied sorrow, she was the phantom of the woman her husband, the imposing business magnate, Nathan Blackwell, thought he understood. He had engineered this very moment, the curtain call of their hollow marriage. But as she met his gaze, not with tears but with a composed, knowing smile, a cold dread, sharper than any economic collapse, seized him. He was about to sign away the future of his empire, his compass, and he didn't even realize it. The truth had just walked in, wrapped in elegance and silence, and he had helped write the script. The air in the penthouse suite overlooking Millennium Park was as icy and thin as the marble beneath Celeste Langford's bare feet. For 3 years, this had been her domain, a glittering prison on the 72nd floor of Blackwell Tower, the crown jewel of Nathan Blackwell's real estate empire. From that height, all of Chicago seemed to kneel before him, a kingdom of concrete and glass. To the world, she was Mrs. Blackwell, the coveted wife of a self-made billionaire, a man whose ambition was as fabled as his wealth. They were Chicago's golden couple, their images adorning the covers of Fortune and Harper's Bazaar with the same smug ease. But behind the flashbulbs and designer smiles lay a facade, a corporate merger masquerading as a romance. Her father, the blue-blooded industrialist Edward Langford, had viewed the marriage as a tactical alliance, a way to inject tenacious ambition into their fading legacy. And Nathan, the kid from South Side who'd clawed his way to the pinnacle, saw it as the final conquest, a trophy deal to cap his ascension. Celeste was just part of the package, though she had tried, at first. She had genuinely tried to discover the man beyond the legend. She glimpsed him occasionally, in the late hours when the relentless CEO shed his armor, and fatigue softened the edges of his face. She saw a trace of warmth when he mentioned his late mother, the only person who had ever truly believed in him. But those were rare flickers in a vast sea of cold ambition. His life was a ledger of wins and losses, and she, his crown jewel, was often treated accordingly. Displayed, polished, and carefully confined. Their conversations were rehearsed statements, their dinners PR events, and their bed, a silent, frozen stretch of luxurious sheets. He was married to his work, to the chase, the strategy, the never-ending appetite for more. In his world of absolutes, of numbers and negotiations, Celeste, with her quiet passion for sculpture and long afternoons spent with novels, was a variable he couldn't compute. The discovery of her pregnancy was a solitary revelation. 2 faint pink lines on a plastic stick in the vast white marble bathroom. It should have been a shared celebration, hushed excitement in the dim glow of early morning. Instead, it was a secret. She cradled that fluttering life, silently blooming inside her, as hers and hers alone. How could she tell a man who penciled in physical affection like a board meeting? A man who, in one rare confession, admitted he viewed children as a distraction, a dilution of drive. She had envisioned the conversation countless times, him behind his oversized walnut desk, eyes like storm clouds scanning stock updates. She'd tell him, and he'd likely interpret it as a move, a Langford heir, good for optics, good for the dynasty. He would plot the child's future as carefully as a leveraged buyout, elite academies, influential mentors, a life engineered for greatness. But would he ever see the child for who they were? Ever hold them not as a symbol, but as a son or daughter? The thought smothered her. This child, her child, deserved more than to be a line in the legacy of Nathan Blackwell. They deserved love, not leverage. And Celeste, after 3 stifling years in the rarefied air of the Blackwell empire, deserved to breathe again. The turning point came not with confrontation, but a whisper through a cracked study door. Nathan was on the phone with his sister Evelyn, the only person who pierced his defenses. "I don't know, Ev," he'd said, wariness lacing his voice in a way Celeste barely recognized. "The company's solid. We'll finalize the Langston merger next month. Celeste is Celeste. She does what's expected. It's functional." Functional. A stable arrangement, their entire marriage reduced to a spreadsheet footnote. The words struck like cold iron, confirming what her heart had long suspected. She was a fixture, part of the architecture, no more alive to him than the multi-million-dollar Rothko hanging in the foyer. That night, her choice became clear. She wouldn't be discarded. She wouldn't be pitied. She wouldn't beg for scraps from his boardroom table. She would be the architect of her own escape, and she would protect the only thing that truly belonged to her. The divorce had been her initiative, a move that blindsided Nathan entirely. He, the master tactician, had been caught off guard. His first response was a blend of irritation and disbelief. Divorce was messy. It tarnished reputations. He attempted to pacify her, offering a boosted monthly stipend, a luxury sports car, even a private yacht. He approached the dissolution of their marriage like any high-stakes deal. Assuming everything had a price, he couldn't grasp that what she wanted couldn't be bought. She wanted release, a life where her value wasn't anchored to the Blackwell name. She declined all his offers. Through her attorneys, she made her conditions clear, unshakable and simple. A clean break, no ties, only what she was legally due under the prenuptial agreement. An agreement heavily skewed in his favor, which she had signed 3 years ago, back when she was just a hopeful woman, drunk on the idea of love. That document had once symbolized her blind trust. Now it was her armor. She didn't want his fortune, not a cent of the wealth built atop loveless arrangements. She wanted her life back. His fury was volcanic. His pride, expansive yet fragile, took a direct hit. He couldn't fathom walking away from such opulence. His legal team, led by the cutthroat litigator Douglas Kane, insinuated she must have a secret lover, some scheme for future blackmail. They combed through her world, searching for even a whisper of leverage. They found none. Celeste's life had been transparent, if painfully solitary. The final hearing to sign the divorce papers was scheduled for a Tuesday in May. It was the day Celeste had quietly been preparing for, piece by piece. She'd been slowly moving her belongings from the penthouse, storing them in a modest 2-bedroom unit she leased under her mother's maiden name, Moreau, on a leafy, tranquil street in Lincoln Park. She'd begun seeing a new OB-GYN, Dr. Priya Nair, whose gentle demeanor and genuine care had been a balm to her strained heart. She had also started investing in herself, not with Nathan's resources, but with a modest inheritance left by her grandmother, safeguarded for years. She enrolled in online business courses, learning about impact investing, studying companies that measured value in humanity, not just profit. She was laying the foundation for something new, far from the chill of Blackwell Tower. On the morning of the divorce, she rose before the sun. She had spent the night in her new home, lulled to sleep by the soft, familiar rhythm of city noise outside her window. For the first time in years, she felt calm, in control, herself. She selected her outfit with the precision of a strategist readying for war. The sapphire blue dress wasn't a whim, it was deliberate. The color of the ocean, vast, powerful, unbound. It was also the same hue as the sapphire necklace Nathan had given her on their first anniversary, a gift she had purposefully left behind in the penthouse jewelry drawer. The dress fit like it had been stitched onto her, hugging every curve, accentuating her pregnancy instead of concealing it. It spoke without words. This is who I am now. This is what you're losing. She applied her own makeup, a soft, luminous finish that amplified the natural glow of motherhood. Her long chestnut hair was styled in loose waves, cascading over her shoulders. When she looked into the mirror, she no longer saw the silent wife in the shadow of a billionaire. She saw a woman who had reclaimed herself. A mother in waiting, a storm contained in grace. Her attorney, a perceptive, sharp-witted woman named Margaret Delacroix, who had once been her mother's college roommate, met her in the lobby of the mediator's building. Margaret's expression flickered with subtle surprise at Celeste's appearance. "You look," Margaret started, eyes scanning her form. "Ready," Celeste said, finishing the sentence with a composed, assured smile as the elevator lifted them to the 40th floor. Her heartbeat was steady, no tremor of fear, no shred of regret, only quiet resolve. She wasn't here to argue or beg or weep. She was here to end something, to sign a document that would unshackle her. Nathan would be there, surrounded by his fleet of attorneys. He'd be in one of his meticulously tailored Brioni suits, face schooled into impassivity. He likely expected her to reflect that same cold detachment, or maybe, in some corner of his ego, he anticipated a breakdown. One last desperate attempt to hold on to him. But Nathan Blackwell was a man who thrived on forecasts and patterns, who believed every outcome could be charted. Today, though, Celeste was the anomaly in his formula. a walking, breathing contradiction to the world he thought he understood. Because the most valuable thing he had ever held wasn't a skyscraper, a patent, or a market share. It was the woman he had allowed to slip through his fingers, and with her, the future he'd never even bothered to imagine. As the elevator doors slid open, Celeste inhaled deeply. It was time. Time to face the man who had nearly dismantled her, and show him, not with rage, but with grace, exactly what he had lost. The long corridor of marble ahead felt like a farewell runway. Each step she took echoed in quiet defiance, her back turned to the past, her eyes fixed on an uncertain, but fiercely hers, future. The conference room resembled a courtroom of capital. A long, imposing walnut table gleamed under the harsh lighting, reflecting the stoic faces of executives in custom-tailored suits. At the head sat Nathan Blackwell, undisputed ruler of this corporate empire. To his right was Douglas Kane, his lawyer with a cutthroat reputation so ferocious it had become its own trademark. On the opposite side sat his chief financial officer, whose permanent furrowed brow deepened as he clutched a manila folder like a life vest in stormy seas. Nathan's gaze was locked on the double doors, his jaw twitching with irritation. Celeste was late. Punctuality was something he demanded, a silent but non-negotiable sign of respect. Her delay was a hairline fracture in the carefully controlled narrative of the day, and it grated on him. He checked the time on his Patek Philippe, tapping one finger softly but impatiently against the polished surface of the table. He needed this over with. A multi-billion-dollar acquisition deal was waiting to be sealed, one that would eclipse every previous triumph in his career. This divorce? An administrative nuisance, a procedural footnote. Then the doors opened, and the entire room seemed to inhale. The air shifted, thinner, heavier. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Nathan's head jerked up, and the mask he had so carefully fastened slipped for the first time in years. He'd expected the version of Celeste he had last seen, worn down, pale, her spirit dimmed under the weight of disappointment. He had braced for a quiet, transactional final meeting. He had not expected this. She was breathtaking. The sapphire dress cut boldly through the monochrome sea of gray suits, an electric contrast that declared her presence with silent authority. The fabric curved proudly around her figure, most notably her expectant belly, which now led her every step with poised certainty. Her face, once tired and hollow, now radiated with health and something even rarer, conviction. Her eyes met his without hesitation or pain. They didn't plead, they didn't accuse. They simply were, anchored, unshaken, and steady, in a way that disturbed him far more than shouting ever could. His breath caught, not just at the sight of her beauty, but at the unbearable truth she now embodied. She was no longer part of his world. She had stepped outside of it, evolved beyond it, beyond him. And the sight of her, so strong, so sure, made his chest tighten with something he couldn't yet name. Regret, awe, fear. In the sterile, brutalist theater of power, she was the only one who seemed real. And for the first time in a long time, Nathan Blackwell felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. It felt like the ground had vanished beneath him. Pregnant. Celeste was pregnant. The thought ricocheted through Nathan's mind in wild, erratic loops. He scrambled for a mental count. 5 months, maybe 6. His mind spun backward through a fog of late-night meetings, cross-country flights, and the cold, widening gulf between them in their final weeks. There had been moments of intimacy, sure, but brief, perfunctory, neatly slotted between calendar invites. Never once had he considered a child. It hadn't factored into his 5-year strategic blueprint. A cold fury surged through him, eclipsing the initial shock. She had concealed this. Deliberately. This wasn't just a dissolution of marriage, it was treason, a high-level ambush. His mind, wired for threat analysis, instantly framed it as a calculated maneuver, a textbook setup. She had gotten pregnant to trap him, to leverage a larger payout, to claim a bigger stake in what he had built. It was all too orchestrated. The timing, the entrance, the dress. Douglas Kane, ever the vulture for opportunity, leaned in and muttered near Nathan's ear. "This is theater," he said flatly. "A last-minute stunt. Stay on script." Nathan nodded, jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing into icy slivers. He pulled his mask of control tightly back into place, but inside a storm churned. Possessiveness, fury, legacy, his child, his name. She was exploiting their child as a tool, a pawn on the negotiation board. Celeste moved to her chair with practiced grace, Margaret Delacroix pulling it out for her. She did not look in Nathan's direction, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. That silent disregard, the total erasure of his presence, ignited him further. He was Nathan Blackwell. No one ignored him. "Celeste," he said, low, cold, dangerous. "I see you've brought a surprise." She turned at last. Slowly. Her expression was calm, detached, as if he were a stranger commenting on the weather. "Nathan," she said, voice smooth and toneless, "I'm here to sign the paperwork, as agreed." "We agreed to terms," he growled, "based on shared knowledge of the facts." Douglas Kane seized the moment. "A material omission has occurred," he said crisply. "A critical update withheld, intentionally, I might add." He gestured vaguely, almost disdainfully, toward her abdomen. Across the table, Margaret Delacroix remained unbothered. She had seen power games play out too many times to flinch at this one. "My client's pregnancy," Margaret Delacroix said coolly, "is a private matter. It has no legal impact on the prenuptial agreement, which, I might add, you, Mr. Kane, crafted with exquisite attention to detail. The agreement holds." "We're here to finalize a dissolution," she continued, her tone sharp but calm, "not to renegotiate reality." "It does affect it," Nathan burst out, his voice cracking through the still air. He rose to his full height, his imposing frame casting a long shadow across the conference table. "That is my child." For the first time, Celeste met his furious glare. A flicker of expression passed across her face. Not fear, not guilt, but something quieter, sadder. Something like pity. "Is it, Nathan?" she asked gently. The question was soft, but it struck like a hammer. "Were you present in its creation in any way that mattered? Did you share the hope? The nausea? The anxiety?" She laid a protective hand on her stomach, her voice steady. "This child is not a Blackwell holding. They are not a clause in a contract. They are a human being, and I will not allow them to be raised inside a boardroom." The words pierced deeper than any shouted accusation. A Blackwell holding. It was as if she had pulled the thought straight from his skull, his earliest, ugliest reaction. He saw himself in it, a heartless executor who placed legacy above love. And he hated that she saw it. Hated her even more for daring to say it out loud. "This is absurd," Douglas Kane interjected, shuffling his legal briefs with manufactured calm. "We'll contest this. We'll demand a paternity test. We'll seek full custody." Margaret let out a short, clipped laugh. It echoed across the table. "On what grounds? That he's richer? That the child could be raised in a mansion lined with silence and neglect? That he'll hand them everything except emotional connection?" She shook her head. "The judge will toss your motion before it leaves the docket." She reached for her folder. "We've got Mr. Blackwell's own deposition, taken just 2 months ago." Nathan froze. He remembered that deposition. His arrogance. The casual way he had described their marriage as strategically stable and emotionally neutral. He had, under oath, described children as disruptions, career liabilities. He had drawn the blueprint of a gilded cage. And now Margaret Delacroix was going to seal it shut behind him. He looked at Celeste, really looked, and for the first time he saw more than the elegant wife, the high society fixture. He saw a strategist, a woman of quiet, deliberate strength, a woman who had orchestrated this moment with the kind of calculated brilliance he usually prided himself on. She had predicted everything. His rage, his denial, his lawyer's threats. She had used his own ego, his emotional tunnel vision against him, and she had walked in with that calm, grounded demeanor, not as a victim, but as a tactician. She had come armed, with facts he couldn't dispute, and a future that no longer included him. "Shall we get this done?" Celeste asked, her voice snapping him back to the room. She reached for the pen lying on the table, her hand steady and unhurried. "I've got a prenatal appointment this afternoon." The casual reference to a life already moving forward without him was like another sharp, clean cut. He watched in stunned silence as she signed her name across the page, a graceful, confident signature, full of finality. Then, with practiced ease, she slid the documents across the table. Nathan stared at them, at the signature line with his name typed beneath it. Signing meant accepting the new truth, that she was gone, that the child she carried was real, that he'd been shut out of a life-altering moment without even knowing it was happening. But what was the alternative? Margaret Delacroix was right. His own words, spoken with smug detachment just weeks ago, had cornered him. Any legal challenge would be public, ugly, and humiliating. It would peel back the facade of his pristine world and show everyone the cracks. He, Nathan Blackwell, the master of leverage and control, had been undone. With a hand that suddenly felt foreign, he picked up the pen. The room held its breath. His heartbeat thudded in his ears like a ticking clock. He glanced up at Celeste one last time. She wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were on the skyline beyond the glass wall, focused forward, already beyond him. And then it hit him. This wasn't only about the papers or the baby. It was bigger. Her poise, her clarity, her precision. It pointed to something else, something he had overlooked, a truth still beyond his grasp. He signed his name, but unlike the bold, assertive signature he was known for, this one trembled. Slanted. Weak. The scrawl of a man who had just lost a battle he never knew he was in. Celeste stood. Her lawyer began packing their documents. "Nathan?" His voice cracked through the silence. "Why, Celeste? Why hide it?" She paused at the door, turned to face him. A quiet, unreadable smile touched her lips, something between sorrow and release. "You were never looking, Nathan," she said gently. "You see acquisitions, you see assets, you see what you want to own, but you never truly see what you have." And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving behind a man brought to his knees by a truth far too late to fix. Nathan Blackwell stood alone, drowning in silence. Only now did he begin to understand. The real unraveling had just begun. The woman who walked out of his life wasn't the same woman who had once married him. And whatever truth lingered behind her transformation, it would haunt him far more than the loss itself. The days that followed blurred into a haze of cold clarity and restless obsession. Nathan buried himself in work with manic determination. The Langston merger became his entire universe, a campaign of aggression and precision designed to prove his detachment. He worked into the small hours, fueled by black coffee and the fury of a man who refused to admit defeat. But no amount of numbers or deals could silence the quiet in his penthouse. The stillness mocked him. Every room was a graveyard. He saw her there, curled on the sofa with a book, her cashmere throw draped lightly across her legs. He heard her laugh faintly in the hallway, an echo of something he now understood he'd never earned. It was in the way the morning light fell on the empty side of their bed. The untouched half of the breakfast table. The subtle, almost imperceptible ways a life once shared had vanished, leaving behind shadows too stubborn to fade. One night, he found a lone pearl earring on her nightstand. It sat silently, impossibly loud. A small, fragile relic of a life he'd bulldozed in his chase for more. He couldn't sleep. Night after night, the same vision plagued him. Celeste, radiant in that sapphire dress, hand gently curved over her belly, eyes full of a pity more cutting than any fury. You never truly see what you have. He had seen her as ornamentation, polished, proper, convenient. She made him look good, sound better. He had mistaken her presence for peace. And yet peace had never truly existed between them. Only a fragile detente masked by luxury and silence. Not once had he asked what she needed, what she felt. He had assumed his wealth, his empire, his name, they were enough. The mistake was monumental. The only person who dared shatter his wall of denial was his sister, Evelyn. She appeared one night without warning, clutching a bottle of aged scotch and a gaze full of worry. Evelyn was a pediatric surgeon, sharp, compassionate, and immune to Nathan's games. She had always seen through him. "She played you," he muttered, pouring 2 glasses, the bitterness thick in his voice. "She waited till the last minute, just to take the advantage." Evelyn took a slow sip of scotch, her perceptive eyes watching him over the rim of the glass. "Did she?" she asked quietly. "Or did she protect her child from a man who once told her that a baby would be a strategic liability?" Nathan flinched. He had forgotten saying that. It had been early in the marriage, a theoretical conversation about the future. He had said it as a logical observation, a matter of practicality. But now, in the wreckage of everything, he realized what it must have meant to Celeste. A blow to hope. A death knell to the idea of family. "She didn't ask for anything beyond the prenup," Evelyn continued, her voice steady, edged with gentle reproach. "She didn't use the pregnancy to demand more. No threats, no leverage. So think, Nathan, what did she gain by telling you when she did? Not money, not a better deal. What she gained was freedom, with her child, on her terms. She didn't just walk away. She took back the story. She knew you'd try to mold the child, plan its life like a business acquisition, so she shut the door before you even saw it opening. She didn't outmaneuver you to punish you, Evelyn added quietly. She did it to protect her baby. Her words hit like slow-acting venom, seeping into the corners of Nathan's iron convictions. He had been so consumed by his own narrative, so sure of his own betrayal, he'd never paused to see it from her side. The truth began unraveling in unexpected ways. It started with Richard Finch, a discreet, high-level private investigator Nathan had used before in hostile takeovers. Against his better judgment and spurred by pride more than principle, Nathan had hired Finch to find out what Celeste's life looked like now. He told himself it was about the baby, about the child's welfare. But in truth, it was about control, about the ache of being blindsided, about understanding how she'd beaten him at his own game. Finch's first report was shockingly ordinary. Celeste lived in a modest walk-up in Lincoln Park. She was enrolled in online business courses. She visited a prenatal doctor regularly, Dr. Billionaire. Finch listed the clinic's address. On a quiet, sun-drenched afternoon, driven by something he couldn't name, Nathan found himself parked across the street. He waited, engine idling, and then he saw her, Celeste, stepping out of the building, one hand raised to shield her eyes from the sunlight. She wore a simple sundress, her pregnancy now unmistakable. There was a new glow about her, effortless and unforced. A lightness in her step, a smile that seemed unburdened. Nathan watched from his car as she spoke into her phone, her laughter soft, her face animated with something that looked terrifyingly like joy. Then he saw him. A man waited at a nearby cafe, tall, with gentle eyes and an open, inviting smile. As Celeste approached, he stood, his hand instinctively touching the small of her back, guiding her toward a table. They sat down, their exchange fluid and easy, laughter flowing between them like a quiet current. A white-hot jealousy tore through Nathan's chest, so sharp it nearly made him nauseous. So this is it. This is the truth. Another man. His attorneys had warned him. He hadn't believed it. But now, with his own eyes, he saw the reason for her quiet strength, her transformation. Him. This stranger. This nobody. He grabbed his phone and growled into it. Finch, find out who he is. Everything now. The next day, the report landed in Nathan's inbox. The man's name was Dr. Ethan Miller, a pediatrician specializing in neonatal care. Widowed 2 years ago, his wife had died of cancer. No children. Co-founder of a non-profit delivering medical care to underserved children in developing countries. He and Celeste had been seen together several times, near the clinic, in the park. A pediatrician, a humanitarian, a man whose life revolved around service and compassion. It felt like a calculated contrast. Too perfect. Nathan imagined her gravitating toward that gentleness, that kind of man. Everything Ethan Miller was everything Nathan was not. Still, as he read deeper, one detail made him pause. Dr. Billionaire, Celeste's obstetrician, was on the board of Ethan's nonprofit. They were likely friends, colleagues. Their meeting could have been coincidental, but Nathan couldn't forget the body language, the familiar ease, the physical closeness. It felt like more. Then came the real shock, and it didn't come from Finch. It came from David Lynn, his CFO. The usually composed man burst into Nathan's office unannounced, pale-faced, clutching a file folder like it might explode in his hands. Nathan, he began, voice thin, there's something you need to see. It's about Westwood Holdings. Celeste's family's firm, old, aristocratic, once powerful. It had long faded from his radar, a relic of legacy wealth, little more than a footnote in her background. What about it? Nathan asked, already impatient. They've been liquidating assets, David said quietly, opening the file. Small properties, minor holdings. It's been going on for 6 months. It's been done quietly, David Lynn continued, sliding a folder across Nathan's desk, through a network of shell entities. But the money's not going back into Westwood Holdings. It's being funneled into a private trust. Nathan flipped open the document. His eyes scanned line after line of legal text until one name stopped him cold. The trust had a single beneficiary, a non-profit organization, and that non-profit was Dr. Ethan Miller's. The room seemed to tilt. Celeste's family, the Langfords, had been diverting millions into a trust for the benefit of a pediatric charity run by the man now closely entwined in Celeste's new life. Nathan stared at the page, his mind scrambling to connect the implications. He looked up sharply. What the hell does this mean? David took a breath, his tone darkening. "There's more," he said. "I went deeper into Westwood's financial records. For over a decade, they'd been paying a substantial retainer to a private medical research facility." Nathan frowned. "And? The payment stopped about 3 years ago," David said. Nathan's stomach dropped. "That's when I married Celeste." David nodded gravely. "The facility focuses on experimental gene therapy. I pulled the name of the lead researcher on the project." He hesitated before adding, "It was Dr. Alistair Blackwell." The name hit Nathan like a punch to the ribs. Dr. Alistair Blackwell, his uncle, a once renowned geneticist who had been cast out of academia years ago for conducting unauthorized research. His work had been discredited, his reputation obliterated. Nathan's own father had disowned him. Nathan hadn't seen or spoken to Alistair in more than 2 decades. What was he researching? Nathan asked, his voice tight. David opened another file. He was working on a cure for a hereditary neurological condition. Rare. Aggressive. It manifests in early childhood and progresses rapidly. He paused. "It's called Blackwell's syndrome." Nathan's breath caught. The name, the legacy, the disease that had killed his younger brother when they were boys. A condition passed silently, devastatingly through the male bloodline of the Blackwell family. A condition Nathan knew he carried. He had once told Celeste about his brother. A rare moment of honesty. But he had never told her the whole truth. He had never told her that he was a genetic carrier, that there was a 50% chance any son he fathered would inherit a death sentence. It was a truth Nathan had buried, compartmentalized and sealed away. A risk he had chosen to ignore, because it didn't fit the narrative of perfection and control he presented to the world. And now, all the pieces fell together with sickening clarity. Celeste hadn't been cheating. She wasn't manipulating him for money. She had uncovered his secret, the one he had gone to such great lengths to hide. She must have discovered his uncle's research, the financial trail from her family's estate. She must have realized why the funding stopped the same year they married. Her father, Raymond Langford, had likely known about Blackwell's syndrome. The marriage between Nathan and Celeste had never been just a strategic alliance. It had been a calculated risk, a final wager. The Langfords had hoped that with their money, Alistair Blackwell could discover a cure in time, before the birth of a potential heir made the risk real. And Celeste, trapped in a marriage built on legacy and omission, had made a choice. The online courses, the sudden pivot to sustainable finance. It hadn't just been about starting over. She was trying to rescue her family's legacy, to pull their resources out of a failed gamble on a miracle cure and put them into something that actually mattered. Something that could heal. Like Ethan Miller's nonprofit. Her pregnancy hadn't been a trap. It had been a quiet, desperate race against time. Nathan thought of her that day, the way she looked at him during the divorce. That composed, serene smile. It hadn't been triumph. It had been survival. She had crossed a minefield of secrets, betrayals, and carefully constructed illusions, and she had made it out, not untouched, but whole. And the baby, their baby, a wave of sickness hit him. He had been furious that she'd hidden the child from him, blind to the fact that what she had really done was protect the child from him, from what ran in his blood. Nathan looked again at the photo of Dr. Ethan Miller, a pediatrician, a neonatal specialist. Of course, Celeste hadn't gone to him for romance. She'd gone to him for answers, for guidance, for help. She was preparing for the worst-case scenario, preparing for the chance that her child would be born with Blackwell's syndrome. And Nathan had been so drunk on ego and control he had missed everything. He had called her manipulative, opportunistic, a liar. And now the full, staggering weight of his own lies, his own willful blindness, came crashing down around him. He had accused Celeste of everything he himself was guilty of. Deceit, manipulation, treating people like transactions. He had been so consumed with empire building that he never noticed the rot at its core. He had lost his wife, his child, his soul, not through some grand betrayal, but by 1,000 small abandonments. Because he never learned to see what was right in front of him, even when it lay beside him at night. He stood abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping harshly against the polished floor. He walked to the towering floor-to-ceiling windows of his office and looked out over the city he had conquered. It all looked smaller now, duller, hollow. He had to find her. He didn't know if it could be fixed, if he had any right to ask for forgiveness, but for the first time in his life, Nathan Blackwell knew he had to try. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man, as a father. Before it was too late. The address he had for Dr. Priya Nair's private clinic was tucked within a discreet, upscale medical building in Lincoln Park. It exuded calm, quiet professionalism, worlds away from the Shark Tank of finance Nathan had lived in for years. He stood across the street, shadows stretching long across the pavement in the late afternoon sun. For once, he had no entourage, no assistants, no power suits to part the crowd. Just a man, alone on a sidewalk, hoping to be heard. Every inch of him felt foreign in this space, out of place among the soft edges and quiet resolve of a world that demanded presence, not performance. He didn't deserve it. He had spent the last 24 hours locked in his penthouse, unraveling every shred of truth he'd ignored. He reread every report, every statement, even his own deposition. Each word condemned him anew. He saw it all, how his ambition had metastasized, poisoning every relationship it touched. He had treated Celeste's love like leverage, her family's desperation like a bargaining chip, her pregnancy like a transaction, and his uncle, Alistair, a ghost now, an ache in his chest. Nathan remembered a man who had once smelled of pipe smoke and books, a man who'd filled his childhood with dreams of science and wonder. Before he was cast out, declared an embarrassment, a disgrace. The memory came back like a whisper. Alistair holding a model of the human brain, his voice animated, telling young Nathan that brilliance wasn't always welcome, but it could save lives. Nathan had laughed then. Now the echo of that moment made his throat tighten. His father, ever ruthless, had taught him to sever every weak connection, to view vulnerability as failure. Alistair, with his eccentric brilliance and impossible research, had been labeled dead weight. But now Nathan saw it clearly. His uncle wasn't a failure. He had been a man trying to save his family from its own tragic legacy, a legacy Nathan had continued, not through malice, but through silence. He stepped off the curb, crossing the street, heart hammering in his chest with a rhythm he couldn't slow. For the first time in years, maybe in his whole adult life, he had no plan. No calculated move, no endgame. There was only one need: to see her, to speak, to tell the truth, however late, to confess, if not to be forgiven. The clinic's reception area was tranquil, decorated in gentle hues of cream and sage. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers, each note meant to soothe. Everything about it was intentional, thoughtful. It was Celeste's world. He felt like an intruder in it, every polished corner a reminder of what he'd never bothered to know. The warmth of the space was foreign, disarming. It was built for healing, and he had come bearing the wounds. Behind the desk, a woman in her 50s looked up, her eyes kind but wary. "May I help you?" "I'm here to see Dr. Nair," Nathan said, his voice oddly distant in his ears. "I don't have an appointment." "I'm sorry, sir," she replied gently. "The doctor's schedule is fully booked. Please." The word cracked out of him, stripped of command. There was no billionaire behind it. No legacy. "My name is Nathan Blackwell. It's a personal matter. Urgent." Recognition flickered in her expression. She paused, picked up the phone, and spoke quietly. After a moment, she hung up. "Dr. Nair will see you for 5 minutes. Between patients, please have a seat." He sat stiffly, hands knotted between his knees. A man waiting for judgment, a man laid bare. The chair beneath him might as well have been a courtroom bench. He wasn't used to waiting. Not like this, not without control, and every passing second stretched like penance. The door finally opened. A woman in a white coat stepped out, mid-40s. Measured, kind, sharp-eyed. "Mr. Blackwell," she said calmly. "I'm Dr. Nair. Please come in." Her office was modest, lined with thick textbooks, framed degrees, and photos of laughing babies. It radiated warmth, life, everything Nathan's office lacked. "You have 5 minutes," she said. Not cruel, not cold, just firm. "I'll be honest, I'm only seeing you because Celeste asked me to. She said, if you ever showed up, I should give you 5 minutes. The words knocked the air out of him. Celeste had predicted this too. Always one step ahead. "How is she?" he asked quietly. "How's the baby?" "They're both healthy," Dr. Nair replied. Cautious, guarded, which, he realized, was exactly what he was really asking. Nathan swallowed, the truth sharp and bitter. "I know about Blackwell's syndrome," Nathan said, the words scraping out of his throat like ash. I know I'm a carrier. And I know you and Dr. Miller are helping her prepare for the possibility. Dr. Nair's expression softened slightly, a flicker of quiet sympathy in her eyes. We've already performed the amniocentesis, she said. We're just waiting for the results. But yes, we have a full care plan in place, regardless of the outcome. She hesitated, then added gently, Celeste has been incredibly brave. She's prepared for every scenario. She thinks the baby has it, Nathan murmured, the realization like a fresh blade to his chest. She's a mother, Dr. Nair corrected, her voice calm but firm. She's preparing for the worst, while still hoping for the best. She spent months researching, meeting with specialists, learning about the condition in ways I suspect you never did. Nathan didn't respond. She's been grieving, the doctor continued, grieving a possibility, a fear, and she's done it alone. Alone. The word twisted in his stomach. While he had been closing deals, presiding over boardrooms, reveling in dominance, Celeste had been carrying this terrifying weight alone. I need to see her, he said hoarsely. I need to explain. Explain what, Mr. Blackwell? Dr. Nair's tone sharpened, the compassion replaced with steel. That you concealed a genetic condition with catastrophic implications for your child? That your entire marriage was built on a lie so staggering it defies belief? Nathan flinched. That you accused her of betrayal, when in truth she was the one betrayed, not just by you, but by her own family. Each word landed like a blow, stripping away the last illusion he had clung to. Her father knew, Nathan whispered. The thought was barely audible. Yes, Dr. Nair said, her voice bitter. He confessed everything after the divorce. Your father and Raymond Langford made a private arrangement. Langford would fund your uncle's research. In return, your father would consent to the marriage. Nathan's stomach churned. A medieval bargain, Dr. Nair said coldly. Two powerful men making decisions about her life, gambling with her future, and the lives of children she didn't even have yet. When you married her, she added, Langford ended the funding. He assumed the threat was contained. It was worse than any of them imagined. Nathan's voice cracked. Where is she? Please, I'm not here to argue or demand anything. I need her to know that I know everything. Dr. Nair regarded him for a long, unreadable moment. Her eyes didn't waver. She saw everything. His brokenness, the soul-deep remorse, the man beneath the empire. He stood before her, stripped of title, of wealth, of ego. He's not in the city, Dr. Nair finally said, her tone soft again. She needed space, needed to breathe. She's at a cottage, upstate. It belonged to her grandmother. It's where she goes when she needs to feel safe. She scribbled an address on a piece of paper and slid it toward him. I'll probably lose a patient and a friend, she said with a tired sigh. But I'm a mother too, and I believe in last chance transformations. Her gaze hardened just slightly. Don't make me regret this, Mr. Blackwell. Nathan took the paper, his hand trembling. Thank you, he whispered, his voice barely holding together. The drive north felt more like a pilgrimage than a trip. He drove himself, the quiet hum of the Bentley's engine the only sound against the chaos in his chest. As the city shrank in his rearview mirror, a sense of something else crept in. Not peace, not yet, but hope. The directions led to a secluded cottage tucked deep in the woods near a lake in the Hudson Valley. Smoke curled from the chimney. It was peaceful. Still, it was nothing like the sterile heights of the penthouse he used to call home. He parked and walked slowly down the gravel path, heart pounding with every step. He saw her before she saw him. She was curled on a porch swing, wrapped in a thick blanket. A mug nestled in her hands. The setting sun painted her in gold. Her belly, round, strong, was silhouetted against the soft light. She looked content, whole, like she belonged to this place. She must have heard the crunch of his shoes on gravel, because she turned. Her eyes widened. The calmness in them gave way to something else, surprise, tension, and a weary kind of sorrow. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, close, but not too close. The space between them stretched like an ocean. Celeste, he said, his voice unsteady. I know. She didn't feign confusion. She simply looked at him. Steady, waiting. I know about Blackwell's syndrome, he continued. The confession uncoiled from him like a weight finally released. I know about my uncle's research, Nathan said, his voice hoarse. I know about the arrangement your father made, the deal. I know that I'm a carrier, and I know that I never told you. He took a deep breath, the sharp country air slicing through him like a blade. There's no excuse, no explanation that can justify what I did. The silence, the selfishness, the arrogance. He hesitated, eyes glinting with raw emotion. For weeks, I convinced myself that you betrayed me. I saw your pregnancy as a strategy. I looked at your strength, your glow, and I assumed the worst. I let my pride blind me. He looked up at her, his voice trembling. But you were the one who was betrayed. You carried this burden, my burden, alone. I saw you with Dr. Miller, he confessed, and I jumped to conclusions. I see now, you weren't running from me or trying to hurt me. You were trying to protect our child. You were being the parent I wasn't brave enough to be. The tears came freely now, hot and unrestrained. He didn't wipe them away. I am so sorry, Celeste, he said, for the lies, for the coldness, for the fear, for everything. You deserve better. And our child deserves a hell of a lot better. Celeste said nothing for a moment. Her expression was unreadable. The light of the setting sun lit her face with a golden hue. A single tear traced down her cheek. Then finally, she spoke. I didn't do any of it to punish you, Nathan, she said quietly. I did it to survive. I was drowning, and I had to learn how to swim, for me, for this baby. Her hand moved gently to her belly. I had to build something real, something safe, something honest. He stepped up onto the porch, slowly, cautiously. Is there any chance for me? He asked. Not for us. I know I've destroyed that, but for them, for our child. Can I be a father to them? It was the only question that mattered. Nathan Blackwell had built towers that scraped the sky, had conquered boardrooms and global markets, but none of it mattered. Not now. Celeste looked at him, truly looked at him. She saw the wreckage of a man who had burned down his own life and now stood in the ashes, asking for the chance to build something worthy. She saw sincerity, pain, regret. She saw the echo of the man she had once dreamed he could become. And then her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen. A small, tremulous sigh escaped her lips. That was Dr. Nair, she said softly, voice thick with emotion. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears she hadn't yet allowed to fall. The amnio results are in. Nathan's heart stopped. This was it. The moment that hung over them like a storm cloud, dark and inevitable. The culmination of everything. Every lie, every secret, every moment of silence that had led them here. He stopped breathing, suspended in a second that seemed to last a lifetime. He had arrived at the 11th hour. But deep down, he knew the truth had arrived long before him. And it had already changed everything. His hands clenched unconsciously at his sides. The weight of his failures pressed down on his shoulders like iron. The pages of his life, filled with control, contracts, mergers, had all led to this one instant where control was meaningless. Where no signature or deal could shield him from what was coming. The silence that stretched across the porch was unbearable. Not even the wind dared to stir. Nathan Blackwell, once the untouchable king of the financial world, stood powerless, waiting for a word. One word, one truth that could either redeem him or ruin him. He wanted to reach out, to steady himself against the railing, against her presence, anything. But he didn't. He didn't deserve the comfort. He had spent too long ignoring the tremors beneath his feet, and now the ground had opened beneath him. Celeste had crossed an ocean of betrayal and pain to arrive at this point. She had shed her silence. She had become not just a survivor, but a protector. A mother ready to face anything for the child she carried. The message in her hand, did it contain the beginning of a new battle? A life defined by hospitals and careful plans? Or was it a whisper of mercy? A flicker of hope? A chance for a future not forged in boardrooms or bloodlines but in truth? He didn't pray. He never had. But in that moment, eyes locked on hers, he wished, with every bruised corner of his soul, for a second chance. Their story was more than a tale of wealth and betrayal. It was about the cost of secrets, the strength of one woman's resilience, and the man who had to lose everything to finally see what he almost destroyed. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here, reading this, even at this hour? If so, then maybe, just maybe, something in Celeste and Nathan's journey stirred something inside you. Maybe it's the quiet truth that many of us ignore. The idea that we often realize the value of what we had only after it's gone. This story wasn't just about betrayal or redemption. It was about the consequences of emotional blindness. Nathan built an empire, but in doing so, he forgot to look at the people around him. Celeste's strength was never in confrontation. It was in survival, in building a life from the ashes of silence and neglect. And when he finally saw it, it was too late to reclaim her love, but not too late to become something better for their child. There's something deeply human in that. As Carl Jung once said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Nathan had to lose everything to begin that awakening, and maybe we all do in some way. So tonight, as the credits roll and the screen fades to black, I want to say this. If you're carrying something heavy, if you've been silent for too long, if you're waiting for someone else to see you, please don't wait. Speak. Choose healing. Choose honesty. Choose life. If this story has touched your heart, if it made you pause and think about your own relationships, your own regrets, your own quiet hopes, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their worth, and subscribe to our channel. Because we're here to tell stories that matter, stories that linger, stories that help us feel a little less alone. We see you, we hear you, and we're so glad you stayed.